Again, I appreciate everyone dropping in here this morning or this afternoon, depending on your time zone. So what I wanted to talk about today is mid-meshing within HyperMesh. And this is effectively a way to skip the mid-surfacing step that we covered during our last demo session. So this is basically just going from some source solid CAD and going directly to a mid-mesh, right? So a shell mesh throughout the sort of throughout the middle of your solid component. So obviously some parts are more viable for this than others, and I'll show you guys a particularly messy part to look at this workflow on, to look at all the tools for sort of coaxing and editing your mid mesh. So we'll take a look at that today. All right. And like I said, if you guys didn't catch me mentioning at the beginning, if you have any questions during the demo, you can drop them in the chat and I'll address them when I get a moment. So let me open up. So we've been conducting these demos in the latest version, the latest release version of HyperMesh, which is 25.0 at the moment. Okay, I'll open up my session. And so I kind of want to talk about a few different aspects of mid-meshing. One is where I see the future use of mid-meshing, and one is just to kind of show you guys what tools we have for mid-meshing and for editing your mid-mesh right now, so that you can be prepared to use them more in the future. Okay, so I'm going to load up some demo model here, and we're going to work on getting you guys access to these demo model files that we use on the website so that you can follow along with us if you'd like. But I'm going to drop in some HyperMesh file here. Okay. And we'll give this guy a second to load here. Okay, so it brings in a meshed wing model that we got. So we're going to be mid-meshing solids. So I'm just going to come over here, geometry, solids, I to isolate. Okay. So for, of course, more simple, maybe like basic bracket type geometry, mid-meshing is, very easy and very quick to get a nice mesh right off the bat. So for like a simple bracket like this, it really wouldn't be too challenging to maybe say, and for things like this, for mid-meshing, I'd for parts like this, it probably makes sense to defeature the holes first. Um, and there's really going to be a few different tools that I show for mid-meshing. So I'll go ahead and start with just creating a custom ribbon for mid-meshing with those tools. So I'm going to come up here, create a custom ribbon, double click, right click, rename, mid-meshing. All right. So yeah, a lot of the times if you're mid-surfacing or mid-meshing, it makes sense to defeature your solid geometry first. So I'm going to drop the defeaturing tool in there. I'm also going to be using a lot of splitting and stitching, which I'll show in a bit here. Okay. And we'll obviously need the mid-mesh tool, so I'll drop that in. And it might be useful to also have the rebuild tool if you want to do like a quick sort of remesh to get redistribute your elements on some mesh face. So I'll drag and drop that in there as well. Okay, so I'm gonna put a separator in between the geometry and the meshing tools. Yeah, just for my personal preference, really. So yeah, I like to start with defeaturing. So for a simple part like this, let me maybe isolate this guy, I to isolate. So for a basic part like this, we can defeature. I'll defeature just the holes, find, and we'll remove all. If you're curious about defeaturing, we've touched on this in the geometry cleanup video that I recommend going and checking out if you're curious about it. So yeah, so I've defeatured my geometry, and then from here I can go into Midmesh, automatic, and going into our options here, we can define our element size, our element type, whether we want to do mixed or trias. And I recommend being cautious of the create an original .pound option. So this would create the Midmesh in whatever this component is called, but it would create a new one .1. So in this case, I would rather just make this my current component. So right click, make current component, so that the mesh just gets stored in the same component with the CAD. So I'm going to turn that off. That's just my personal preference, but I just want you guys to be aware of that. So I could select the solid or the component. I could also select it as a solid. Doesn't really matter. And middle click or just hitting the mid mesh will generate your mid mesh. And so the purpose that I see Midmesh being used now is for the parts representations, which we'll cover in an upcoming demo. But I really just see this being useful for automating, creating shell mid-surface, basically shell meshes of bracket typed components, or components that would often get shell meshed. So parts like this, right, where it's easy to just get a nice, quick, clean mid mesh there, right, and then we can go ahead and automatically assign thicknesses from our source CAD as well. So using mid-meshing, I think will be really helpful for automating, creating meshes for parts as you import parts through our parts workflow. So again, we're going to cover that in more detail in the coming weeks, but that'll be an interesting workflow through our parts browser, where you can create representations for parts based on certain parameters and criteria that you set for meshing. Okay, so you can have like different sets of parameters and criterias for different types of parts, maybe for different sizes of size ranges of parts, that you would define with if I can find it, with the parameter and criteria files. So you can set things like, for example, how many elements you want around certain holes with certain radii, maybe how many rows of elements you want through certain fillets with certain radius ranges, things like that. So this is where I really see the use for mid-meshing, is sort of defining all of these upfront parameters so that you can automate the meshing process. But of course, defining all of these parameters is easier said than done. So that's the main sort of, I guess, hiccup or hold up, I would say, is putting in the time and effort to define all of these parameters and how you want to mesh around all of these features. But then once you've defined all of those parameters and criteria for element quality, then it becomes a lot more viable to just automatically generate meshes for parts as you import them, which is pretty cool. So yeah, so that's where I see the future of mid-meshing, but we also do have some manual mid-meshing tools for whenever you run into scenarios where maybe you just have like some certain problematic areas where the mid-surface, the mid-mesh didn't really capture the source solid that well. So that's what I'll spend some time taking a look at here. So yeah, so that was an easy case with this little bracket. So if I bring back up all of my, if I get a parts menu. And let me bring back up all of my solids. I'd isolate. I tried to announce the keyboard shortcuts I do, but if you're curious about the keyboard shortcuts, we also did a demo over that recently that you can watch the recording for. Okay, so yeah, I want to take a look at, and I know I'm running out of time, so I'll try to be quick here. But this is, I think this like rib here is a good example of what would be what I probably wouldn't recommend using the mid-surface tool to generate or a mid-mesh tool to generate a mid-mesh for. But I think this is at least just a good example to see all the different manual editing you can do in the case that you have some problematic areas in your mid-mesh. So again, I'm going to start with defeaturing. I'm just going to remove the holes just to make things simpler for myself. And if you'd like, and I'd probably recommend this, keeping fixed points at the center hole locations so that you have reference points to, say, create connectors referencing to the original locations of these holes. But I'm just going to make things easier on myself. It'll give me a cleaner mesh if I don't have those fixed points there. So I'm just going to change this to none. So that'll just remove all of my holes here. So middle click to remove all. Get some water while it does that. And all right, there we go. So defeatured our geometry. That'll make things definitely easier for us. And of course, anytime you're meshing, it's recommended to get a general understanding of the dimensions of your model here, right? So length of 10 here for this edge, or length of 80 for this edge. So maybe an element size of 10 is sufficient here. So we'll go automatic. And actually, let me first make this component right click. Let me make it current. Okay, so we grab that solid. I'll double check that the create an original component is off. So I could set my element size here, but it's already what I want, element size of 10. So we'll go ahead and mesh that. All right, and let me put my email on do not disturb if I can. Okay. So we'll wait for that to load. And anytime, generally what I would recommend if you are doing mid-meshing like this, I just recommend if it doesn't create a nice mid-mesh, just Control Z to undo and maybe just try lowering the element size. Oftentimes that'll go a long way in getting a better, cleaner mesh with better connections. So I'm just going to say up front, this will have a lot of problematic areas because of how complicated and weird the geometry is, like with all these edges and stuff like that. So there will be a lot of cleanup, which is why I'm using this example to show the workflow here. So again, I wouldn't recommend using mid-meshing on a part like this, but it at least gets the idea across. Okay, so as you see here, and with the last parts that I mid-meshed, whenever you mid-mesh, it goes into a wireframe view of the source geometry, and then gives you a mesh with a topology view of your mid-mesh that it generated. And so if you remember, if you were in our geometry editing sessions, these colored edges here represent connections of, in this case, mesh surfaces, not geometric surfaces. So these colored edges are telling us how our mesh is connected. So yellow edges denoting the connection of more than two mesh surfaces, green denoting connection of exactly two mesh surfaces, and then the red edges are free mesh surface edges. So that's why I added, I don't know why it keeps taking me back here, but that's why I added in the split and stitch tool in here into my custom mid-meshing ribbon, because a lot of times you can come in here to edit the geometric topology here to say, like, suppress certain edges that you may not want. So like, for example, let's say you don't want these edges here. You could come in, split stitch, go unsplit, unsplit, and unsplit these surface edges. So left click, and then left click again. Okay, see, that removes that now. And so I'll show some examples of how you can, like remove and align. So I guess let me, before I get too deep into everything here, let me first show the inspect. So let me turn our source CAD back on. So this would be, I would recommend probably the first tool to go to right after generating your mid-mesh. This will give you a general idea of how your Midmesh maps to your source CAD. So if you select your source CAD, I'm going to Control A to select all my displayed Midmesh elements. And then we'll do find. And so it'll find things like, gaps where there's a gap between the element edge and the source solid edge. Sources for find FE. Did I select the wrong CAD maybe? Let's see here. See if I can by component. Let me try that. Okay. Hmm. Oh, I must have skipped a step there. I think you have to do it right after doing the automatic mid-mesh, but that's fine. We'll at least just skip that step for now. So going into some of the other things. So, you can do a visual inspection. If you go into the components wireframe, the CAD, that'll make it easy to sort of see. If we go back into our mid-mesh, we can see our topology view. So you can sort of go through, do a visual inspection. Keep getting emails. So I couldn't figure out how to mute my emails. Apologies for that, guys. But yeah, so some of the things I want to show here. Let's go with align first. So align, what this will do is, if you're not satisfied with sort of how it's aligned, like let's say it actually aligned pretty well here. But let's say I'm not satisfied how maybe it aligned this edge, created two edges. So maybe let's say I don't really like how it created the two edges there. So what I could do here is use unsplit to just get back to one edge. So I could do unsplit, and maybe I just unsplit this one, and this one. And then I can do, then I can do align, and you can align multiple things. You can align like an edge to an edge. So I could click on this drop down and align some line and say, oh, maybe it lets me. Okay, why are you not working? Okay, that's fine. We'll align maybe a surface as well. So we could do it maybe this way. So like I can align the surface here. And again, this is tricky because the source solid is tricky. So I can maybe like align to this surface and see if that gives me a better mesh. So if I do align, yeah, that's not terrible. So that's sort of refits that edge a little bit. So yeah, let's say I'm good there. I can maybe also align like this face. So I can align that face, maybe this face as well to this surface, align. And I'm just aligning to single surfaces here. I could also align it more to two. Let me see if I can find another edge. Not sure what's going on with my coloring. Okay. Okay, so yeah, let's see if I can find, so yeah, like maybe just kind of going through, that connection looks pretty good actually. looking through, looks like this connection's not great. So what we could do here for cases like this, maybe we can just go in and just manually delete some of the overhanging elements. Delete. Okay, and then, sorry, I don't know why my session's being so janky today. So yeah, what we can do here is now we can use this mid edge tool. And what this does is this can be useful for patching in or basically creating edges to a gap of a mesh that you could use the repair fill to patch in. So I have this geometric edge here, this FE geometric edge defined, and I have this edge defined, but I need to create an edge here. So what I could do is mid edge, node list, point to point. I could give this a guide direction as well, some guides. Like if this was a sort of curved edge that I wanted to make, and I could maybe give this curve as a guide. But here I'm just going to keep things simple and just do a straight edge. So I'll do create, and that creates this mid edge. Okay. And then, so now I have 3 edges defining this gap. So I could use edit topology to create, and sorry, I don't know why it keeps finagling with the coloring of my elements here. Select, deselect. Okay. So now I have 3 edges, and I can use edit topology to create the 4th edge. So I was showing how you can use split and stitch to unsplit any of those mesh edges, right? But you can use edit topology to create them. So I can go from this node to this node. And there we go. Creates that edge so that now I can come in, repair fill, and this just allows you to patch in any sort of gaps in your mesh. So that's a lot of what the what the mesh topology, I should say, edges sort of help you do, right? It helps you sort of create patches that you can patch in with the repair fill tool. So all I have to do is select one of these edges, and it should give me a little preview. There we go, little preview, where I can then say fill face. And there we go. Fills the face, connects it as denoted by that yellow edge there, denoting the connection of more than 2 mesh surfaces. Okay. So yeah, I think I've covered basically everything. I'm not sure why I couldn't get this inspect tool to work. I typically use it right after doing the automatic mid-mesh, so that might be why, or it might just be this is a particularly bad part. But the inspect tool would show you like individual elements and would tell you how far the gap is from the edge or from a surface or things like that. But I find that it just supplements a visual inspection, which I still recommend doing a visual inspection. So yeah, using that, I could go through, delete sort of, like areas like this and maybe patch in, like here, I'd probably just delete these, patch in an edge. You can maybe come in here and align these elements. You could do like elements by face. Bloop. And you could like align those to that bottom surface of the source kind of type of thing, So align is useful. There you go. Check it out. Let me see if there's any good candidates for like an edge align here. I don't think so. Yeah, maybe if I wanted more curve out of this, like if you wanted, so like this seems to be mapping off of like this mid mesh portion seems to be mapping off of the OML of the source solid. So I could maybe try like aligning that edge. Not sure why it's not letting me select those edges. It might be because I have the source CAD there. Hmm. Okay, I'm not sure. I think my session's just being a little buggy today. But yeah, you can also, like in this scenario, you could select these edges here and then align those to maybe this edge if you want more of a curve. Oh, okay, now it's letting me select the edges. There we go. So I could say like maybe I want those more aligned to this curve, for example. And there it aligns that edge to the curve. So yeah, again, I purposely used a more complex CAD just to get some problematic areas to show you guys how to fix. But again, where I see this useful is defining upfront parameters and criteria for automatic mid-meshing of parts upon import of those parts, and then just going in and using these remaining tools to fix up just small little problematic areas where maybe the mesh didn't connect a member well enough, like how it didn't here. We fixed that pretty easily. So yeah, just wanted to give you guys a rundown on those tools. Um, if you have any questions, feel free to drop it in the chat. I don't think you have the ability to unmute your mic. But if you don't have any questions, feel free to go about the rest of your day. Again, for those who didn't hear my spiel at the beginning, I'll put the link to our webpage for this series in the chat. We're about to announce the next 5 topics that we cover. So definitely take the advantage over these next few days before we make that announcement to submit a request for a topic if there's anything you're interested in us covering specifically. So I'll drop the link to this in the chat. Also, feel free to use this survey just to give us some feedback about how we're doing. Are these helpful for you? How can we make them more helpful? Things like that. So cool. Yeah, appreciate everyone tuning in. I'll keep the call open for just another couple minutes here for any questions if you guys have any.